It is the largest country on Earth, spanning 11 time zones, from the icy reaches of Siberia to the crowded streets of St. Petersburg. Russia is a land of paradoxes, beauty and brutality, pride and pain, monarchy and revolution. Its history is a winding river, often frozen, but never still. From medieval warriors to nuclear superpower, Russia's past is one of constant transformation. Every age brings a new ruler, a new vision, and new scars. To understand modern Russia is to travel through time, to the court of Tsars, the battlefields of empires, and the red halls of revolution. This is not just a chronicle of power, but a saga of survival. From tundra to tyranny, Russia's legacy is as boundless as its borders. Long before the Kremlin cast its shadow over Moscow, the story of Russia began on the riverbanks of Eastern Europe. In the 9th century, Norse traders known as the Varangians sailed down the Dnieper and Volga rivers, blending with Slavic tribes and giving rise to a new identity, the Rus. Centered around the city of Kiev, this early state known as Kievan Rus became a melting pot of Vikings, Slavs, and Byzantines. Through trade and tribute, they built alliances and rivalries, and in 988, a decision would change everything. Prince Vladimir converted to Orthodox Christianity, binding the Rus to the spiritual and political influence of Byzantium. The Kievan Rus were no strangers to war or glory. They fought nomads on the steppe, forged princely dynasties, and nurtured the seeds of Russian culture. But the unity was fragile, and in the centuries to come, those seeds would be scattered by fire. It began not with an empire, but with a prayer, and a sword. In the aftermath of the Mongol invasions, much of Kievan Rus lay in ruins. Yet in the ashes, a new power emerged from an unlikely place, Moscow. Once a minor outpost, it became the rallying point of resistance, faith, and ambition. As the Mongols dominated the region through the Golden Horde, Moscow played a careful game, paying tribute, amassing wealth, and slowly gaining favor. Its princes were cunning diplomats, marrying into power and claiming religious legitimacy through the Orthodox Church, which had moved its seat to Moscow after the fall of Constantinople. Then came Ivan III, Ivan the Great, who declared Russia free from Mongol rule. He expanded Moscow's territory, centralized power, and adopted the double-headed eagle as a symbol of a new empire. Under his grandson Ivan IV, Ivan the Terrible, this dream became something darker, a czar wielding divine authority and merciless force. Autocracy became Russia's inheritance. And Moscow, once a backwater, became its sacred heart. What the Mongols burned, the Muscovites rebuilt, stronger, and more absolute. By the dawn of the 18th century, Russia stood on the brink of transformation. And leading that charge was a towering figure, Peter the Great. Obsessed with the West and determined to modernize, he tore through tradition like a storm. Peter founded a navy, restructured the army, and reformed Russian society from beard to bureaucracy. He moved the capital to a city of his own creation, St. Petersburg, built on marshland and ambition. Here, he opened a window to Europe, even as his reforms came by force, often stained with blood. After Peter, another imperial titan rose, Catherine the Great. A German-born empress with Enlightenment ideals, she expanded the empire deeper into Europe and the Black Sea. Under her, the Russian court dazzled with intellect and power, even as peasants suffered in silence. Between them, Peter and Catherine turned Russia from a frozen giant into a European empire, fearsome, elegant, and deeply divided. They didn't just build an empire, they crafted an image that still haunts the world's mirror. Behind the golden domes and imperial fanfare, Russia's foundations were crumbling. Beneath the aristocracy, millions of serfs toiled in bondage, locked into feudal servitude centuries after it had faded in Western Europe. The wealth of the empire depended on their misery. Uprisings erupted, from Pugachev's rebellion to waves of peasant unrest, each a warning that Tsarist power was fragile. In 1861, Tsar Alexander II tried to halt the spiral. He freed the serfs. But the freedom was incomplete, land remained scarce, poverty remained deep, and resentment burned hotter. Reformers called for constitutions. Radicals whispered of revolution. Even as railways were built and industry spread, the gap between ruler and ruled widened. Alexander II was assassinated by revolutionaries. His successors veered between crackdown and concession. Russia stood at a crossroads, straddling Old World monarchy and New World chaos. The empire was expanding. But inside, it was splitting open. They freed the people, but not their pain. And history would not forget. The empire had bent for centuries, but in 1917, it finally broke. Years of war, hunger, and repression had primed the people for rupture. The February Revolution brought down the Romanovs. The October Revolution replaced hope with fire. Lenin returned from exile like a thunderclap. His Bolsheviks seized Petrograd with slogans and rifles, promising bread, land, and peace. The Tsar was gone. The provisional government fell. And from the ashes, a new red banner rose over the Kremlin. The Russian Civil War turned fields into graveyards. Reds versus whites. Cities starved. Villages burned. The Bolsheviks won, but at immense cost. A new regime was born, not just of revolution, but of fear, propaganda, and absolute control. Lenin's dream was not a republic, it was a forge. And Russia, beaten and bleeding, was the iron upon which the future would be hammered. They overthrew a tyrant, and built a machinery even he might fear. Out of the chaos of civil war, a new order emerged, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. In 1922, Lenin's vision became reality, a federation built not on bloodlines, but on ideology. Red banners flew. Statues rose. Religion was silenced. The state became God. After Lenin's death, a new figure seized control, Joseph Stalin. With cold calculation, he transformed the USSR into a superpower and a surveillance state. Industry was forced to grow at impossible speeds. Farms were collectivized. Millions died in famines, purges, and gulags. The Soviet dream came at a monstrous cost. But beneath the oppression, the USSR was changing the world. It electrified villages, sent satellites into space, and stood as the counterweight to Western capitalism. Allies called it a miracle. Enemies called it a prison. Either way, it was here to stay. The Iron Curtain wasn't just a metaphor. It was a system, sealed, silent, and watching. They built a future from steel and silence. And called it progress. By the 1980s, the cracks in the Soviet machine were no longer hidden. The economy was stagnant. The people, weary. In the halls of the Kremlin, a new voice rose, Mikhail Gorbachev. With his twin policies of glasnost and perestroika, he tried to save the system by opening it. But freedom is a wild thing. Censorship faltered. Protests ignited. Satellite states broke away. The Berlin Wall crumbled, and with it, the illusion of permanence. Old rivalries flared, long-silenced truths surfaced, and in 1991, the red flag over the Kremlin was lowered for the last time. The collapse was swift, surreal, and shattering. For the first time in 70 years, Russia was no longer an empire, no longer the USSR. It was a federation adrift in the chaos of capitalism, crime, and confusion. The 1990s were wild, violent, and uncertain. What began as revolution ended in ruins. But beneath the collapse, a hunger stirred, a desire to reclaim dignity, pride, and power. The bear had fallen, but not forever. The empire died not with a bang, but with a bank run, and a broken promise. The 1990s were a time of wild freedom and deeper despair. Boris Yeltsin took power amid the ruins of the Soviet Union. Overnight, Russia embraced capitalism, chaotically. State assets were auctioned off, birthing a class of billionaires while millions fell into poverty. The ruble collapsed. Crime surged. Parliament rebelled. In 1993, tanks fired on Moscow's own White House. Yeltsin, once a hero of reform, staggered under the weight of corruption and crisis. The Russian people felt abandoned, promised liberty but handed instability. Then came Vladimir Putin. A quiet former KGB officer, he rose swiftly from obscurity. In 1999, he became acting president. By 2000, he was in full command. He promised order. He delivered it, with force. The media bent, the oligarchs bowed, and Russia stood straighter. Stability returned, but at a cost. Dissent shrank. Nationalism swelled. And slowly, Russia began to look back not with regret, but with nostalgia. The empire was gone. But its image was alive, in memory, in ambition, and in the man at its helm. That he offered a future, but it came dressed in shadows from the past. Russia is not just a country, it is a question that history keeps asking. From the forests of Novgorod to the halls of the Kremlin, from Tsars to commissars to presidents, its story has never followed a straight line. Empires have risen. Ideologies have clashed. Borders have shifted like ice on the steppes. Today, Russia walks a tightrope between past and present. It is a democracy shaped by autocracy, a capitalist nation haunted by Soviet ghosts. Its influence stretches from energy markets to cyberspace, from Ukraine to the UN. But its identity, its soul, remains elusive. To understand Russia is to embrace contradiction. It is Tolstoy and tanks. Gulags and symphonies. Space flights and surveillance. Every chapter reveals a different mask, a different truth. The world watches closely, as it always has, wondering what tomorrow's Russia will be. A bridge to the future? Or a mirror to its past? Russia doesn't end, it echoes. In maps, in memories, in the myths we still tell.